Welcome to this ICF Slalom podcast episode, part of the series running until the Los Angeles 2028 Olympic Games. We bring you the inside stories from around the globe from the people who make canoe slalom so special. Here's your host, John Gregory.
A warm welcome to the latest ICF Slalom podcast episode. Thanks for joining me. The International Whitewater Hall of Fame comes to the Canadian Canoe Museum in May for the latest induction of those who have been trailblazers, pioneers and advocates of whitewater paddle sports. Today I'm joined by International Whitewater Hall of Fame induction chair Claudia Kerckhoff van Wijk, Carolyn Hyslop and Jeremy Ward. This special episode was recorded at the stunning new Canadian Canoe Museum in Peterborough, Ontario. Let's start today with Claudia van Wijk. Many of you will recall her as a member of the Canadian slalom team in the 70s and 80s. She has quite a story. Claudia, what are your memories of Jonquière Worlds?
Oh, wow. It brings such a big smile to me because it was really the catalyst for paddling, for racing on big, natural, warm whitewater, which you can't really find in Europe. And there was the first World Championships in North America on our continent where we're comfortable to paddle. And so it was the sort of coming out of our style of attacking, being aggressive in paddling whitewater, but using the water to do the work for us. Jonquière is just a gorgeous setting in the wilderness of Canada, of Quebec. It flows out into Lac Saint-Jean, which is a huge lake in super remote little towns around it. We lived and breathed, and when I say we, it's really American and Canadians. We work together. We train together. Our countries are so huge that we support each other, and we really blossomed and did well in Jonquière. And I have Linda Harrison to thank. She we all paddled with the men and would compare our results almost more with how we did in the men's class than we did in the women's. And this came about because in Europe, in German, K1 Damen was on the scoreboard, K1D, and we got the name, or at least the Americans called the women the K1 Drifters, and we were not, us female paddlers in the 70s said, that's not us. We are able to paddle just as fast as the men, and that was the World Championships that we were able to show that. Kathy Hearn won gold, Linda Harrison bronze, and I was fifth. Pretty special. We finally broke through the European dominance.
Why is World River Centre and International Whitewater Hall of Fame initiative important to you?
Yes, it started in 2019 when my parents were inducted into the International Whitewater Hall of Fame as pioneers. It was a incredible, a deep, meaningful event to go there with my daughters and my husband to pick up the award for my parents in Germany at a Canoe Messe, which was the trade show, and see how honored paddlers that had given back to the sport were. And I wanted to help or participate in continuing this and keeping it more international. And it's a huge honor to bring it to Canada and into the Canoe Museum because it celebrates the boat that we have transformed into racing, into competition, but it all started as a need for transportation. And the canoe was the boat that opened up our country, and the lakes and rivers were the highways. So to bringing the International Whitewater Hall of Fame here was part of why I joined the board of the World River Centre, and pretty excited to make that dream come true.
We're in front of your kayak at the Canadian Canoe Museum. I mean, you're among many pioneers, trailblazers and athletes featured at the museum. But tell us more. It must be very special for you to be here in front of a kayak that you raced in.
Yeah, it's pretty special. It brings back so many good memories. I'm hugely honored. One isn't often archived in a museum when you're still alive. So to see my boat here brings back the memories of racing, and I still love slalom. Paddling a slalom boat is my favorite. This boat here was my competition boat in 1981 at the Bala World Championships on the Trewaren River. And it's Canadian designed. Keith Cummin from Merlin Kayaks, he made it. I helped seam it. He's just south here in Kingston, where he was building boats. And the paddle is a Nimbus paddle, also a Canadian paddle. So it's very appropriate that this was the peak of my slalom career. So it's bittersweet. I don't remember or think about this memory, but now that we're here again, I actually, in 81, had the fastest time by 5 seconds and a clean run. So I should have won the gold medal, but a section judge gave me a 50 for not having clear direction through a flush gate. And it showed it very clear on video, but it was when video just was coming in. So my protest, the appeal, wasn't allowed to use video. So I knew I had reached my goal, and that was a big turning point for me, because it was the next year that I took over running Madawaska Canoe Centre for my parents, because they had moved over to owl rafting on the Ottawa River, helping my boyfriend at the time, now my husband of 40 years, because it became the bigger business. And they said, Claudia, please, can you be the director? And for 40 years, I've been introducing thousands of people to the sport that I love. And I am so fulfilled. And this boat brings back all those memories.
That's an amazing story, and yeah, bittersweet. The Trewaren or Bala Mill was actually the first piece of whitewater I ever paddled on.
Well, there you go, right?
Why is recognising the contribution of International Whitewater Hall of Fame inductees important?
To me, it's really important to recognize those that give back to the sport that has given so much to them. You don't do it for recognition, but when you are able to give recognition to the outstanding contributions of athletes, of pioneers, of advocates, I feel that it just is full circle, and I'm really proud of what the World River Centre is able to do.
Beyond the induction at the Canadian Canoe Museum on Saturday, May the 2nd, there are also extended events to celebrate paddle sport. What should anyone attending expect in the days beyond the ceremony?
The ceremony is on Saturday afternoon, and then the next day is the celebration of Roger Parsons, who's being inducted on Saturday, one of the 5. Roger was single-handedly the one who made the Gull River's Minden Whitewater Preserve reality. He lobbied funds, he lobbied all the paddlers, and I'm one of those slalom athletes that helped build the infrastructure, but we had Roger and also our coach, Heinz Pohn, that rallied us to build it. And Roger passed away last spring, and we haven't had a paddling farewell and a thank you in appreciation to all that he's given our sport in Canada. So Sunday is that, and we're going to have people speak, have films that Roger himself created back in the day of Super 8, no sound. And we're going to have a ball race. We're going to have also the national team, the Canadian national team training on site, because the following weekend is our Canadian team trials. So that's Sunday. And then Sunday evening, for those that want to continue exploring our rivers. We're traveling a little bit further east and to Madawaska Canoe Center on the Madawaska River. And we have a 3-day mini week of rivers where we're going to paddle the Madawaska, the Petawawa, and the Ottawa River. And it'll grow in intensity. The Madawaska is class 2-3, technical. The Petawawa pumps it up a notch. And then the Ottawa is the big volume play waves that many have never paddled. And we're making that happen if you want to join us.
That was Claudia van Wijk. She represented Canada at the Worlds in Jonquière, Bala and Murano. We chatted together at the Canadian Canoe Museum. Next, I spoke together with curator Jeremy Ward and Carolyn Hyslop, Executive Director of the Canadian Canoe Museum. Jeremy, why Peterborough?
Why Peterborough indeed? I think if you understand the museum and the collection that we care for, you'll realize we follow canoes and kayaks where they lead. And the museum's collection takes us coast to coast to coast and around the world. Across Canada, you could argue, and I would appreciate, that the Canoe Museum could be located in many locations where rivers connect, where they intersect. There have been these historic cultural exchanges and interactions that give the canoe a very strong presence in so many locations. Many of them are now cities. Peterborough is one of those locations, and we are located here with much to draw from in the inspiration that we get from this location as a canoe museum here in Peterborough. This is, we're located on the Otonabee River, the Otonabee River, which is the river that beats like a heart as it flows through Mississauga territory. This is an ancient canoe route that's been used for thousands of years as a travel network through Mississauga territory and used by others coming through this place. So there is a deep and rich grounded connection to canoe culture in this area. Also, in more recent years, for about a century, this was the manufacturing epicenter of wooden canoes. There were more companies in the river valley between Lakefield, just to the north of us, through Peterborough, down to Rice Lake. More companies with international export taking the canoe from the manufacturing to paddlers around the world for over a century. So those are two good reasons why we're here. But it is exciting to think that in a country like Canada, the idea of a canoe museum could have a home in so many places.
The Canadian Canoe Museum logo alludes to the strong Indigenous roots of canoeing. Can you explain the cultural significance of that heritage and how the new Canadian Canoe Museum logo pays homage to that?
Yes. Well, it's sort of what Jeremy was saying about rooting the canoe museums here in Peterborough on Mississauga territory. It's really important that we ground ourselves in the territory and the waterways around us, physically in the location here in Peterborough. So working with local Mississauga people at Curve Lake and Hiawatha and down at Alderville First Nations, there was a real energy about giving the Canoe Museum a new, basically giving it its Indigenous name. So working with language holders at Curve Lake, Monty Taylor and Ann Taylor, they granted the Canoe Museum, our new logo now has the local dialect of Mississauga, or of Anishinaabemowin, so Ojibwe for some people. And so Jimon Kinomagawin means basically a canoe learning place, a learning place for all around the canoe. And so we wanted to take that a little bit further, and in addition to grounding the logo in the territory here, we wanted to go to where the pictograph, so the canoe that's on the logo, we wanted to go to the territory. And so building on these relations we've had with Fort William First Nation for many, many years now, we started to open up the conversation about how could we best do a recognition of those relationships, but also the territory that the logo is from. And so working with Fort William First Nation, we actually we came up with a a bit of a different take on the logo itself, the visual identity. So not only is the pictograph still part of how the museum thinks of ourselves, but we're now honored to be able to showcase the actual rock face. So the block that's behind the logo is representing the rock face that the pictograph is on. And so for us, that's really meaningful because it's a constant reminder of these relationships that we carry and the long history and an incredible future where we can work together. But we wanted to have a water recognition and a land recognition all built into the visual identity. And to us, it speaks of these wonderful people, great relationships, and our commitment to those relationships with Indigenous peoples, not just locally and at Fort William First Nation, but also across the country and around the world, because so much of what we do here is rooted in relationships and in making sure that these canoes and kayaks that we get to care for on a regular basis are also grounded in community and culture and identity.
Roy McGregor aptly named his book Canoe Country. It seems that our relationship with water through paddlecraft and the Canadian Canoe Museum itself act as a platform for storytelling. To what extent is that true? Jeremy?
I think that's absolutely true. I think that some people might say, well, I'm not seeing it yet, perhaps, if they're not familiar with the threads and the narratives that we follow. But the canoe is this abstract idea at the same time that it's something tangible, and it is present in so much of the history and heritage of this country as a means of connection or travel or interaction, exchange, and so many other things. But it was also present in moments in individuals' lives that were truly transformative for them. And there's a lot for the public to discover here. So we consider the Canoe Museum more like a big house. Our role, our opportunity is to create the space, create the opportunities, and to bring different perspectives, different storytellers to the Canoe Museum to share their narratives to a wider audience. And so when you find people who come with an impression that a canoe might be a 12-foot freestyle boat with a saddle, to somebody else, it might be a 39-foot dugout canoe, and they're both coming together with their own experience to a common conversation that may be happening in our exhibits. We've taken a very different approach where we take a big idea and we bring these brilliant people together to share their narratives, their perceptions on this, and that's really opportunities for growth. So Roy is I think, right on the money. There is something very special here where people, their connections to landscape, their connections to the natural environment, their connections to history and culture, and personal transformation. This place is imbued with that everywhere you turn, and it's really quite uplifting for visitors to the museum, whether they see us in person or just experience us remotely, that there is no single narrative, and that makes it very inclusive, I think, and quite exciting.
Well, we've just started building on this idea of story. Downstairs in the museum, there's two spaces where the collection lives at the museum. Upstairs here, where we are in the exhibition hall, and then downstairs in the collection hall, which is about 20,000 square feet of a space that is effectively a storage space. But for us, it's this wonderfully alive place where canoes are resting. So they're not on exhibit. They're not part of regular people's visits to the museum. And so we offer guided tours, et cetera. But we wanted to bring some of those stories that are in the collection hall alive. And so we've actually just started recording some stories from the collection with Jeremy so that we can be able to share that outward for people that may not be able to get here because they live on the other side of the world, or they live in a remote community and traveling to the Canoe Museum might not be a possibility. And so we want to, again, sort of broaden the reach of the museum and share these stories because it's a great way for people to connect with something that is, they may not realize actually plays a pretty significant role in this country.
How does this International Whitewater Hall of Fame fit with the museum's strategic objectives?
Well, part of the work of the Canoe Museum, I'll jump in on this one first, is to really broaden our reach. So we want to be engaging nationally and internationally through the collection. And so I can see it being a very good fit from that perspective, because these are different audiences, like Jeremy said, like this idea of a big house, right? This place where there's multiple groups and perspectives being shared through the museum, and hosting the ceremony here is a really great honor for us, because this is a group of people that are celebrating this long history of this particular part of paddling that we love dearly, and so for it to be here is really we're really excited about that.
The museum's collection is not representing the absolutely most recent, latest and greatest. And we are not a Hall of Fame. There is a nuance between our activities and something like a Hall of Fame, which is hitting these high achievements, the most recent accomplishments. And typically, the museum and the collection that we care for is behind a little bit by several decades as we watch and learn from the communities to see who best represents different elements of the different families within the paddling community, right? Because a quarter of the collection that we care for comes from Indigenous communities and families. We also have over a century and a half of expedition canoeing, expedition paddling reflected in the museum's collection. We have flatwater sprint. And the fact that the whitewater paddling community and the watercraft used there that are purpose-built and for the races, this is a younger sport with that kind of purpose-built hull design. The collecting at the museum tends to be drawn to both the achievements of the paddler, but also the innovation, design, development, and the game-changing elements that may be baked into that hull design that also influence the sport. And this is why we are often a little bit behind the time, if you will, to give a longer view on these things. That's in the permanent collection, but we will continue to enrich the museum's collection over time to create a good space within it for whitewater paddling, absolutely. But there will be this sort of gentle pause that happens as the years go on. In the meantime, hosting events like this and showcasing the museum as a home for this sport is so important to us, and that's a really important opportunity for us to play and to learn from here.
Yeah, I mean, in historical terms, whitewater paddling is relatively new. But from a manufacturing point of view, fiberglass, carbon Kevlar, plastic, has allowed boat design that was unthinkable probably, 50 years ago even.
Right. Absolutely, and incredible innovations are still taking place. We see that in different branches, whether it's marathon paddling, whether it is flatwater sprint, and certainly with slalom, and freestyle and the others, that you see these innovations that are often driven by the athletes themselves, and I find that really exciting too. You know, that the days of flattening out the ends of the kayak with the tire of a car to just change the entry and exit lines on the canoes. We hear from folks, back in the heady days with a heat gun and the tire of a car just to change the hull to get it to do something else. And eventually the sports catch up to the innovations in the hull designs too, and the achievements of the paddlers. This is really cool stuff that it's fascinating to watch from us, and it's really fascinating to share with the public.
How can the museum inspire our next generation into discovering our relationship with the land, water, and each other?
Well, that would be my hope. I would, as somebody with a passion for educating and sharing this place with others, I really hope the museum does inspire others to build their own connections. And that's was sort of baked into the exhibit design and the museum design. Part of why we chose this location when we needed to switch to another spot to build the museum was building a place where we could have both an inside and an outside experience. Because I think the connection of the two, to have for me, to have a collection of canoes not connected with the land and the water that they're meant to be used in, it somewhat, it dissociates you a little bit from. And so for me to have a museum that can have on-water programming, so we can get people outside, if they're at the museum so inspired that they want to get into a Voyageur canoe and get out onto the water and experiencing for the first time, many of them. And that's what the museum can do, is it can offer a first-time experience for a lot of people. And for the folks that are maybe coming back to the sport after a little while, or they're looking to find new ways, we've got programming and skills and courses, and so we sort of merge both the indoor museum experiencing, looking at the sort of the long history of the canoe and the kayak in this country to today. And we do need to do something about having people. There's something really getting people on the water. There is something rather gentle about moving through a waterway and the simplicity of that, and the sort of how it can really take you to different places and transform you. And I think that, I have no doubt, I mean, I've seen it time and time again, myself, people I've been guiding, where there are major transformational moments that happen when you're in a canoe on a canoe trip. And I'd love to see more people do that, because it builds a sense of stewardship, care for the earth, and care for one another, and a different sense of yourself. And I think those are all very good things that we need right now.
National Geographic and the New York Times have listed the Canadian Canoe Museum as a must-see tourist destination. Why?
I think the Canoe Museum and the canoe collection is a little surprising. And so I think there's something to be said. I think people often ask me, seriously, a canoe museum? Why? And then there's a little bit of a giggle and we laugh about it, but the Canoe Museum, absolutely. This is an incredible collection. It is surprising. I think it is something that people often don't expect. And so, and we've also just built this incredible, beautiful facility on the water where you do have a whole mix of experiences potential when you're here at the site. And so I think it is a cultural destination, it's a recreational destination, and those fit beautifully into basically bringing people to the area as tourists to experience what we have to offer, because it might be a visit to the museum, it might be sitting in on a 2-day paddle making workshop, maybe it's seeing one of our builders in residence. So these makers from across the country that come and set up residencies for a number of weeks here. So you can see a birch bark canoe being built, but you can also meet the maker and build your own connections. All these things that we've sort of put into the plan of what makes this museum a little bit different and quite exceptional, I think have all led to this moment of a major cultural destination, a major reason to visit. And we're fortunate that that's been picked up and that people are recognizing that this place has a voice and has something to say.
Well, I wouldn't want to add much to what Carolyn said. I think you said it beautifully, Carolyn. I think there is only to say that I think that there is a real hunger and an appetite for authentic experience, for the real things, the natural things, and not just the synthetic experience as well. Although those are useful tools for communication, I think what people are excited by visiting the museum in person, whether it's exploring the collection or the campus and the facility or the programs that we offer, it's a little bit like a slow food movement. It's the real thing in real time. There's time to slow down. There is not a huge high-tech element to the museum. We've intentionally kept that in control. And it gives people time for that reflection and to build their own connections, like you were saying. And our position here is, perhaps for many, is a gateway. It's an introduction. And from here, you might head off to Madawaska Canoe Center, or to others and pick up increasing skills to build your own competencies and to go further and further and find your own connections. But our privilege and our role then is to meet the widest audience, inspire them inside and get them outside.
That was curator Jeremy Ward and Carolyn Hyslop, Executive Director of the Canadian Canoe Museum. I spoke to them at the museum in Peterborough, Ontario. 5 inspiring individuals are being inducted into the International Whitewater Hall of Fame in May. You heard Claudia talk earlier about Canadian pioneer Roger Parsons, and we last chatted with Australian Olympic medalist Danielle Woodward in the daily episodes for the 2025 Penrith Worlds. 2 individuals who have done so much to advocate for Whitewater are being inducted: Hugh Canard from New Zealand and George Wendt from USA. Claudia also had an interesting story to share about our final newest inductee, US Olympic medalist Dana Chladek.
So Dana has a wonderful history with us. Her parents were world champions in C2 mixed, coming from the Czech Republic, now Czechia, and immigrated to the US in Detroit, Michigan. And they wanted their daughters to fall in love with whitewater paddling, and they knew they wouldn't be the best to get them started. So at 15 years old, Dana came to work at Madawaska Canoe Center in the kitchen. And she progressed and learned her paddling strokes there, was challenged. And back in the day, we had many world champions as our instructors. So you rise to be as good as the people around you. But she was still playing with the thought of slalom paddling seriously. And I remember at Muskoma race, where she went to Dartmouth College, in the change room, she said, "Claudia, I'm doing it." And that was a saying that Linda Harrison used to say, "I'm doing it. I'm gonna give it my all." And that's what Dana decided. She's fully going to give her life to being the best whitewater kayaker in slalom. And she did it. And to pay for her way, she was so creative. She had her own clothing company called Rapid Style. And we were so proud to carry her gear at Madawaska Canoe Center and wear it. She's come full circle. And it was so wonderful when she brought groups of young kids that she was coaching up to Madawaska Canoe Center, and we would inspire the next group. Her slalom kayak from the Atlanta Olympics is hanging in MKC's dining room. We're so proud of her.
That was Claudia van Wijk. She represented Canada at Worlds in Jonquière, Bala and Murano. She is the chair of the International Whitewater Hall of Fame induction event, and we chatted together at the Canadian Canoe Museum. Thanks to my guests today, Claudia Kerckhoff van Wijk, Jeremy Ward and Carolyn Hyslop. In the show notes, I have added links to the Canadian Canoe Museum, where you can see the logo we discussed and their beautiful collection. There is also a link to the registration for the International Whitewater Hall of Fame induction on May the 2nd. And our last episode featured 8 of the 9 athletes who have won worlds in more than one class, and together with Bill Endicott. Did you catch it? If not, go back and listen. In our next episode, my guest will be Gabriela Satkova from Czechia as a preview of the 2026 season. In the coming weeks, we will see various International Open and ICF ranking races, including the venue for this year's Senior World Championships at Riversport, Oklahoma City, USA. I'm John Gregory. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, tell other people, send them a link, like, follow, or write a review. And if you need more, keep reading Vittoria Valdi's brilliantly insightful and eloquent blog. Stay safe.
That's it for now, but please subscribe to the podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or YouTube, and leave a review too. Until the next episode, keep it fast and clean.